Welcome back to He's a Giant, a pod about all things college football and all things Giants football. I'm your host, Sal, back from my hiatus with my co-host, Monty. What's going on, man?
What's going on, dude? I dropped the hat today to kind of show you what it's like to have hair, like you did in that picture there.
It is true. I've been revealed as a person who once had hair. It is true.
Really
There was a
fucking got
time.
you, dude. Fucking
There was
bang,
one. There was once a
killed
time.
you.
It was a long time ago, but there was once a time that I had hair. I wasn't born completely bald.
Nailed, exposed.
Yes, it was amazing. All right. Fun wild day on this app. Crazy stuff that goes on here. It's hilarious. Almost strange, but very funny. All right, dude. So we got a lot to get through. We haven't been here for a couple of weeks. Thank you guys for being here. We're gonna let some people filter in. Um, it's been a couple of weeks. I know we're a little behind in these reviews, but we're gonna try to catch up. We're gonna go over edge rushers today. It's a decent edge rushing class. It's an interesting class, definitely different from last year's group. So I think for depending on what you're looking for, you may find this an intriguing group, but it's definitely not for everybody, is what I would say. But before we get into that, let's talk about what's going on in the Giants world, man. So 5.5 years ago, the Giants selected Daniel Jones with the sixth overall pick of the 2019 draft.
Oh boy.
And yeah, it was a long time ago. And he has been their quarterback ever since, barring the times that he's been, lost to injury. And this past weekend at the bye, after the Giants fell to 2-8, the Giants on Monday finally revealed that they were benching Jones, and not just benching Jones, but relegating him initially to QB3 behind Tommy DeVito, who's been leapfrogged over Drew Lock to QB1, Drew Lock QB2, and then they signed Tim Boyle to the practice squad, and
Shout
it
out
looks
Connecticut.
yeah, and it looked today like Tim Boyle was getting QB3 reps. So it looks like Daniel Jones is QB4, but still on the Giants. So what were your thoughts when it happened?
I mean, I was begging for it to happen. I was talking about it for multiple reasons I want it to happen. I was saying from the logical sense, like, and we said from the beginning of the year, like we didn't even want to see Daniel Jones out there this year because he had that injury clause, and it seems like a guy who is not going to be on the team beyond this year. It seems like, they made that pretty clear in the offseason that they were looking at one point to upgrade quarterback. And kind of once you do that, it seems like this was likely going to be the last year of Daniel Jones. And to go out there and risk that injury clause never made much sense. Was almost fireable offense, you could say, to put him out there in that case. If he got hurt, it would have been bad. Luckily, we avoided that. Thank God. So now he is not even eligible to really go on the field. He won't be active on game days at all, seemingly. So from that standpoint, very happy. And then just from a Giants fan, I was so emotionally drained of Daniel Jones. I just couldn't watch that man play football anymore. I didn't care who else it was. I don't expect Tommy DeVito to be any better than Daniel Jones. It's just gonna be different than Daniel Jones. They won't be bad in the same ways, and that I'm excited to see because I can't do it anymore. I couldn't do it, and I am very happy that I never have to watch Daniel Jones play football ever again.
Yeah, I think that's the big point. And the take home from all this is it's over. He's not playing for the Giants again. It's long overdue. Admittedly, I never wanted him drafted. I wasn't happy when we drafted him. I would have preferred Dwayne Haskins if we were going to go for a quarterback at the time. That was what I thought then. And mainly, I thought if you're not going to get a quarterback, just go ahead and take Josh Allen, who was sitting there, the pass rushing Josh Allen, sitting there at pick six and whatever. I think the Giants kind of forced it. It is what it is. Years go by. The guy has not been good. Uh, all the fiasco stuff aside, it's over. He's not playing another down for them, which leaves us to a weird place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because and this might be resolved soon, but he's still on the team.
Yes.
The guy's still on the team. So, rumor has it from, people who have been, people like Ricky and others that, I guess are in the know a little bit that Daniel Jones obviously was upset and angry about being demoted. I think anybody would be to some extent, just, even though he deserved it based on his play. But there's at least some rumor that the Giants went to his agent and asked them to get rid of his injury clause, which is a big no-no in the
Mm-hmm.
NFL. Like the NFLPA is all over if you do that. This happened with Russell Wilson and the Broncos. It was a big mess. So it actually leaves you open to liability if you do this. And I'm not sure if this is true or not, but the rumor is the Giants did try to do that to say, hey, you can keep starting, but you got to get rid of the injury clause. Well, right away, you've made a huge mistake because the player can just say no, which he did, which is the right thing to do. And then if you bench him, he's going to be able to at least make a case to file a grievance with the NFL and the NFLPA that you're actually punishing him for an injury clause. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what the punitive damages on that would be, but that's not a good look for the Giants if that's true.
Yeah.
And it's a little mind-boggling because you could have just benched him for being bad. Like this was
Mm-hmm.
not complicated. Like he was 2-8 and playing terrible in a lost season. It would be the easiest thing in the world to say, we just need to change things around. You're not playing well. We're going to put in Tommy DeVito or really Drew Lock, but that's another part of this. Why wouldn't you put in your QB2, but put someone else in and bench him, and that's that. But word has it that Athletes First, who represents Jones, and I believe it's their president or CEO, who's his actual direct agent, not happy about this, and that they may want an outright release of Jones, which makes sense for all parties, honestly. Jones should want a release. He should.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason for him to sit around being QB3 or QB4 where he's never going to touch the field again. If I'm him, I want to try out for a team and get some reps and get some film out there so I could maybe earn a job for next year. So he'd want that, and I don't know why the Giants would want this guy just lurking there. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a problem, and I mean, I don't know how much of a locker room problem it is, but there's already at least a couple of players who are not happy about it. Maybe just as friends, but it's just a weird dynamic to have your starting franchise quarterback who you paid sitting there on the bench as QB3 or 4 while you're playing football games. Why do you want that? Just get him out of here. Just cut him.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. So I mean, we talked about this a little bit earlier, and you kind of covered some of what we talked about with that, and to the point of if there is any truth to asking him to wipe his injury clause, and there's any threatening to like go after, even if they didn't ask him, if there is like some like real level that they're going to say that we benched him because of the injury clause and thinks that can get you in trouble, like it's not worth the headache. Just cut him, move on. You don't need it. Um, I would move on. I have no issue with moving on from him. I think it's probably easier to do a clean cut. That said, outside of potentially getting in trouble for it, I don't really give a shit either way. Like I know it's a little bit cleaner, but I don't think most the locker room really has this attachment to Daniel Jones anymore. I think there's guys like Dexter Lawrence, obviously, he's friends with them. Darius Slayton, friends with them. All those guys came in the same draft class. There is something there. I think a lot of the guys, especially the guys who came in post playoffs, don't see that with Daniel Jones. I don't think there's really any attachment. They've played less than a full season with this guy at this point. If you've come in post playoffs, I think a lot of those guys are ready to move on, and I don't think they really care too much. I'll just say to make the argument for keeping him, I don't really think you should, but I think one, if I'm in Joe Shane's shoes right now, uh, I think the easiest way to get fired if I'm Joe Shane is if Daniel Jones somehow ends up on the Cowboys before you play them and they start him and he beats you on national television. All of us knowing the emotional owner John Mara is after watching Saquon run wild on us, and I still think letting Saquon walk was the right move, but but with that said, I think that for all the bad that Joe Shane did, the Saquon is probably the thing that is most likely to get him fired at this point, which is crazy. Because he's done a lot worse than that. And I think it would be similar if he would be very embarrassed if that happened. So just for self-preservation, at least to wait till after, I can kind of see it there. And the other one, and I don't think this is something they will do. I don't think this is something they should do. But another thing I mentioned to you was if they want to make him a post June 1st cut, not for this year, but for next league year, they would have to wait till after the season, I believe, designated on a post June 1st cut. You could still I believe you can still cut him before, Mason. I know you're in the chat, feel free to chime in if I'm wrong. I believe you could still cut him before that deadline, but just as far as bookkeeping goes, designating a post June 1st cut, that would give you $30 million in the cap and push 11 million down the road instead of having 19 million now and not having any penalty next year. I'd rather just pull the Band-Aid off in that case, but you know, if they want to leave that flexibility so they have the option, if you cut him, you don't that flexibility is then gone. So that's the one argument to keeping him, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really care about spreading out the cap hit. In fact, I would prefer not to. As you said, I would just take my medicine with this organization. If you're going to draft a rookie quarterback, there's really no reason to do any of this stuff. Just move on. Um, but yeah, Mason's saying it's correct, but you don't get the space until after 6-1. Yeah, so there's
Yeah,
not a
we
lot
were
of
talking
value in
about
that
that. We
extra.
weren't
Yeah,
sure.
there's just not a lot of value in that space in
Yeah,
that cap.
because
So just
it's
take
a
your
lot of
medicine and
money
take
to get later
yeah,
on.
just eat the dead cap year one and move on with it and get your team past this really kind of annoying point. So, I'm not a big fan of doing that anyway.
I'm
So,
not either.
yeah, I don't know. I think that there's more optics here than anything in terms of not cutting him, but I still maintain that I think they will cut him. I think that's what's going to end up happening, and
Yeah.
it's probably going to happen pretty soon. I don't think they're going to let him finish out the season with the Giants.
My prediction, I still stand by. I think it'd be something with either too close to the Cowboys games for him to get a chance to jump on and start, or after the Cowboys game. That's my guess. I do think that they're worried about a potential optics issue with him going inside the division, and you know, not that I think Daniel Jones is going to change that team around, but the Cowboys are already a better team than we are, and he could easily beat them by just being this same thing as Cooper Rush.
Daniel Jones is the balance shifter in the power struggle between the current Cowboys and Giants. What a situation. I think we all need to see that. I actually would love to see it. I'd love to see Daniel Jones versus Tommy DeVito on Thanksgiving. That would be a
I
lot of
mean,
fun to
if you're
watch.
rooting for Joe Shane to get fired, that's a surefire way to
Just
make sure it
just
happens.
just rooting for good TV. That's
Yeah.
entertainment. All right. So that's what's going on with the Giants world. Like I think we both feel like he's gonna get cut. It's just a matter of when. I don't know when they'll do it, but I wonder if this noise is gonna grow over the next few days, especially as practice after practice goes by. So we'll see. Um, the Giants, before we move on to the edge, the last things, we're already at that point of the season. I hate to do this, but it's already like, tankathon time and draft position following, which is awful. At 2-8, the Giants right now, based on their strength of schedule, are the fourth pick overall. And it's going to be hard to get to the top two, honestly. Like you're almost like when you look at the teams that are all there, the three ahead of the Giants and the ones right around them, like
Well,
because of strength of schedule issues and stuff, you almost have to lose out to get a top pick here.
yeah. Well, if you look at it, it's we are slowly creeping up on the teams in front of us strength of schedule wise. We jumped the Raiders already. So we have a steady schedule of 520. The Browns have a steady schedule of 517, and the Titans have a strength of schedule by 514. So we're creeping up on them. There's a chance we could just beat them by a straight strength of schedule tiebreaker. Jacksonville's 492. They'll I mean, this stuff can change like a little bit week by week, but likelihood will never pass Jacksonville. But there's a chance that, things will start to shift. The Giants, you know, we were in a good position last year with our strength of schedule around this time, and things started to shift poorly for us towards the end of the year.
I don't hear you. Are you frozen?
Can you hear me now?
Now I hear you. Okay.
Okay. Hopefully
Yeah, I
everyone
thought you.
else got that.
Okay. Yeah, I did get that. I just thought you cut out there. All right, man. Shall we move on then to what we're doing with the edge review today?
Yeah, and I'll say one thing. I just want to mention, kind of on the topic of it. I know we've been kind of slow on this. We've had stuff, so Me and Sal have been talking. We don't have a date by anything, but we'll keep you guys updated on the quarterback thing. It doesn't necessarily we're not necessarily looking at it has to go last thing. We're looking at it as we're gonna do it when the timing's right for us to get a full evaluation of this. So we'll keep you guys updated, but just because some of these episodes get pushed out doesn't mean the quarterback one will for sure. We'll put that out when we think we have all the evidence we need to really do a full evaluation.
Yeah, yeah. I think it'll be something you want to put a lot of thought into. And I think this class is a little bit less obvious than previous years in terms of some of the way we were doing the ranking. So we'll get to it. All right, let's get to what we came here to do, the edge review. And this is an interesting group because the Giants do have three edge rushers currently under contract, and Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Aziz Ojulari. Ojulari is going to be a free agent, an unrestricted free agent after this year. I think it's improbable that the Giants sign him back, but not impossible to have a rotating stable of edges. But let's just argue for argument's sake that it is unlikely they bring him back, and the Giants are going into the season with just Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns. There are guys in this group that are interesting, and I wouldn't dismiss the possibility of taking an edge, especially some of these types of guys, because this particular group of players might actually complement those two very well. And I think that's what's intriguing about the class.
And one thing I want to say before we jump into it, we are going to give you 5 good names. And, I think these are 5 really good players, but there is probably another 5 or 6 guys we could have easily talked. I mean, there's literally 2 guys on this list that were on our list last year who went back to school that aren't on our list this year. So, like, both Ohio State kids, both went back to school, both are on our list last year, not on our list this year. So it really shows to how deep this edge group was, which was kind of the issue last year. Really good first round guys, but after that, there wasn't much.
Right. But, it is, it is an intriguing group, though.
It
I
is.
mean, I think it's a fascinating group because they're a different profile, right? The guys who are edge rushers here, a very different physical profile on average than the guys that we've seen in years past. So why don't we just jump right into it? We have 5 guys. We did our usual ranking system where we came up with 6 objective criteria to try to, well, as objective as we could make it, to give a score to each one. Each of us gives a score to those things. We get a cumulative score and an average score. The scoring system is 1 through 5. 1 is basically not an NFL player. 2 is a below average NFL player. 3 is an average NFL player. 4 is an above average to Pro Bowl level NFL player, and 5 is an All Pro. So when we give our scores, we're looking for above 3, but as close to 4 or 5 as we can get for the top guys. So we have 6 categories again. I'll read through them very quickly before we start, but they are explosiveness and quickness. That's 1. Upper body strength and hands. That's 2. Bend. That's 3. That's important for edge rushers. Pressure ability. That's 4. Setting the edge. That's 5. And then drop zone coverage skill, which is 6. Those are the 6 categories we're going to be grading from. So we graded it out, and we had a little bit of a controversy over who'd be number 1, but we went with a consensus guy who ended up having a tie for the top score here for us. So why don't you introduce our edge 1, Monty?
Yeah, so it was interesting. This guy I had 1 grade higher, and then the other guy, well, you had 1 grade higher basically. But we went with the more consensus here. So we went with James Pierce out of Tennessee, edge rusher, 6'5", 243 pounds, so a little bit of a lighter guy here. 4-star recruit. Having a really good year so far. 30 tackles already, up 2 tackles from last year with 28. 15 tackles for a loss, tied for last year already. 10 so I mean, this guy is having a really good year. So far he has an 82.8 run defensive grade, 82.1 run defense grade, 60.7 tackle grade, 83.4 pass rush, and 54.2 coverage. But let's get a little bit some of my thoughts about from watching the tape on James Pierce. I think the thing to keep in mind about James Pierce, what really makes him special, what ultimately made him my number 1 guy. It wasn't even the guy I necessarily enjoyed watching the most, and we'll get into who that was. But He has that elite first step and speed. And I think that is so, so important in the NFL, and that's something that all these teams look for. When these guys have that elite first step, they don't fall far in the draft. I mean, like Kayvon Thibodeau was a guy who had that elite first step, and that's why he got drafted so highly. And I can go on and on. There's been guys year after year who have that, but it's not like something that you can find typically on day 2, day 3 of the draft. You can find really good athletes, like guys who are like 4, like you see like a Jason Owe, freak athlete, but he didn't have that get off that some of these guys have. And James Pierce has that get off. He has incredibly good at timing the snap and getting off ridiculously fast, very explosive, very fast player to match with that. Um, and I think that's what he mostly uses to win right now. He uses his speed, and then he's a very flexible player, very bendy with both like his hips and his ankles, and he can, flatten up and get to the quarterback before really the offensive tackle can get fully set into his kick step. He brings a really good swim move and rip move to it. He also he contributes well in coverage. In 2023, he had an 88 coverage grade, really good. It's a little bit down to 4.2 this year, but he's a guy who Tennessee uses in coverage and has that athleticism. Uh, the issue with him is he is an undersized player. We went over this. He's 243 pounds, and it shows up on tape. He can struggle in the run game due to his size for sure. I wouldn't call him a liability in the run game, but certainly not a strength. You're going to want a good run stopper on the opposite side of him because I think the NFL, he'll get abused a lot more, and he is being abused in college, and he's really not being abused that much, but it's you can tell he's being outpowered, and that shows up in other parts of his games too. Like, he doesn't just lack power in run games. He doesn't really have a power aspect to his pass rush. It really seems to be all finesse from what I could tell. He doesn't have he can use a little speed to power, but that's not a huge part of his game. And ultimately, I do think he needs to add more tools to his pass rush plan to really be that elite pass rusher, especially the fact that he doesn't really have that power aspect to his game. So whether that's getting stronger and being able to add that, or just continuing to add more finesse moves, if he really wants to be that elite pass rusher, that's what I kind of see. But I mean, this guy fits the prototype of the traits you look for in these top 10 picks all the time. So what do you got on that, Sal? What do you have on James Pierce?
I think you got it. I think he's a really good all-around edge rusher, mostly a speed guy, and he uses that speed effectively with a nice repertoire of pass rush moves. I think he does the job you want essentially a stand-up edge to do as an outside linebacker type. Just get around the edge very quickly, has a lot of different moves, can drop into coverage, do all the things you said. I think he's going to be coveted. I think he's explosive and a good athlete. I do think NFL teams are going to want him because he's a plug-and-play pass rusher. What I would add, I think, what I think what's worth noting are some of the metrics that we look at. His run stop rate is 12.5%. That's like 99th percentile. His pass rush win rate is 21.9%. That's elite. Anything above 20% is elite.
Yeah.
So, he has the metrics that you look for to be a translatable pass rusher and an edge setter in the NFL. I'm a little surprised at that run stop rate. I think he's okay in the run game, but I thought there were some real deficiencies there. I think he does get
Mhm.
overpowered, like you mentioned, and I wouldn't expect that to be a strength of his at the NFL level. But is he a guy you would take off the field and running downs? No, I think he's good enough where you leave him out there, and he's such a disruptor.
Agreed.
So overall, I agree with you. I think this is a good football player. Our scoring system, if you want to jump to that, a little bit
Yeah.
different, but not by much. I mean, we both gave him a 5 on the explosiveness and quickness, that first step move. We both gave him a 3 in upper body strength and hands. I don't think he wins with strength, but I don't think it's a negative necessarily. It's just average. His bend is very good. We gave him an above average score of 4. We both now you gave him a 5 on pressures. I gave him a 4. I can see why you gave him a 5. I mean, I just said his pass rush win rate is elite. I only gave him a 4 because I felt like projecting this to the NFL level without some of this, the strength. I don't know if that's going to translate to like a Pro
Mhm.
Bowl caliber, pass rusher, but
Yeah.
it's a minor point.
I I think part, and I actually was originally kind of thinking 4 because I didn't feel like he this year is necessarily the elite of the elite, like pressure getters, even though he's really high up there. But the fact that he's been very, very high up there for 2 straight seasons, I'm like, all right.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, he's been doing it for multiple years now.
absolutely. We both gave him a 3 on edge setting and a 3 in drop zone. So I mean, what the score basically translates to is we think he's an average player in many functions of an edge rusher as an edge setter in zone, some of his strength, but his ability to get, pressures, rushing the passer, and his bend and his explosiveness as an athlete are elite. And I think that puts him in first round discussions and our edge one, or at least tied for our edge one. Let's put it that
Yeah.
way. And by the way, our rankings are not going to be consistent with what you guys see on some other draft boards, and we just have our own system of we watch them, we like we like what we're looking for, we give them the grade, and we just kind of go by the score. So don't be shocked by where these guys are all ranked. But I
And to
think the
be
best ones
honest
will be
with
covered.
you, like you asked me, we'll talk about it as we go through there. If you ask me who my favorite guy of this is, he's not James Pierce, but James Pierce graded out the best because I think, he has most of the traits that people look for, and he's has elite traits, and those bring it up, and he doesn't have like a lot of weaknesses. Like just because they grade out well, doesn't mean like that's like our flavor for sure. It's just like that's objectively the guy who graded out well for us.
Right. No, I agree. Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's hard for me to envision Pierce not being like a top half of the first round pick when all is said and
Yeah,
done.
that first step's too good.
All right, let's go to our number 2 edge rushers. So hang tight, your guys are going to be there. Um, but in our grading system, this guy graded out basically the same as James Pierce for us. We just had the scores flip flop.
Hmm.
I was a little higher on this guy. You were a little higher on Pierce, but our
Hmm.
edge 2 is Nick Scourton or Nick Scorton, edge rusher, 6'4", 285 pounds from Texas A&M, transfer from Purdue, 4-star recruit. He's a junior this year so far. He has an 80 overall PFF overall defensive grade, 79.4 run grade, 73.8 pass rush grade, and a 72.3 coverage grade. He has 31 tackles, 14 for a loss, 5 sacks, 2 pass deflections, 30 pressures. He missed 12.9% of his tackles, and I want to say he has about a 14% pass rush win rate, although I will double
I can
check
check
that.
while you're talking.
Yeah, 14%, exactly.
Okay.
So not elite, but decent. So why do we have him here? You got to watch him. So first of all, let's start with his frame. He's 6'4", 285. Really, he's probably closer to 264, 290. He's a big dude. His frame is a larger frame for a guy who's typically an edge setter and the kind of person that you could basically see slide from outside linebacker all the way to like an interior D lineman with his versatility and his strength. And he plays like that. He is a power guy. I mean, this is a straight, power rusher. He's a bull rusher. He gets his hands up and he blows the lineman backwards into the pocket over and over again. He's a speed to power guy. He does have a very quick first step. I think we had a little debate as to whether we would classify that as explosive. And it's
Mhm.
an intriguing trait. You guys will know when you watch him. He has a lot of he has a lot of movement with his legs getting off the snap. And it almost looks like he's not explosive. But he gets a big quick first step and then he gets his hands into linemen and drives them backwards. That's basically what he does
Yeah.
over and over and over again. But he does have some versatility there in his pass rush repertoire. I was kind of surprised by the things he can do. Namely the spin move. He has a nasty spin move that he sets guys up for with constant bull rush, bull rush, bull rush, and then all of a sudden he just hits them with a big spin move to the inside
Mhm.
and gets to the quarterback. He, like I said, he gets his hands into the chest of the lineman. He gets his hands up to knock balls down. He has a good pad level. He knows how to use leverage, and as an athlete, for a guy his size, he moves really well. For a guy who's closing in
Does.
on 300 pounds, he's really good in space. He can drop into coverage and dip very nicely. And I think this is his biggest strength. He's an outstanding, edge setter. He's a
Mhm.
strong edge setter. not just not a liability in the run game, but an asset. Really sets a nice edge, gets his hands into the chest of linemen, drives them back, and makes it. He just makes it very difficult for ball carriers to get around him. He's getting a pass rush while setting that edge. He's a really strong kid. So those are the pros. I think if you want to go into cons, again, the explosivity question, is he an explosive athlete or not? He doesn't necessarily look it other than the quick first step, but that's definitely an issue I think that will come up. And I think some of the combine testing might help answer some of those questions. And I would agree that, he's not, I think you put this here, he could show more bend. I don't think he shows
Mhm.
much bend at all in his repertoire, although I think he has it, but he just tends not to show it. Definitely has to develop some simple counter moves, not a lot, but I would say just a couple of counter moves, like a few different angles, and setting up,
Mhm.
leverage issues with a lineman and a counter and just I think he would win even more emphatically. But not a lot not to like about Nick Scrouton, Scorton. I forgot
Whatever it is.
however you want to say his name. But what are your thoughts on the A&M edge, Monty?
Yeah, I think you nailed a lot of it, since you kind of left off on the cons, I'll kind of touch on that a little bit. Um, yeah, I think he's a guy who just needs to work on his hands and his counters a little bit. I think, as a like you said, he's a really good run defender. I think it's a lot with his strength. Um, and he can like shed a guy and get off it, but I think his hands aren't the best there. I think he can improve his hands to block shed a little bit better, and that could make him be from like a good to a great run defender. I think that there's a separation there of these guys who can really just like shed, and he's not quite there. Um, and then like I said, same with the counter moves, but yeah, I mean, this guy is such a powerful rusher. I mean, there's multiple times that I saw him just take an offensive tackle and stick him in the lap of the quarterback and just be like, "Here you go, like take that right in your lap while you're trying to make a play." Said match the spin move. And I'll say, dude, I have a hard time trying to pick out where this guy is going to play in the NFL, and I don't mean that in like a tweener kind of way. I mean that in like, and I think it's partially why he graded so well for us. He does everything, and
Yeah,
for a guy who's this big, he does everything. Like he legitimately has coverage chops, which is crazy for a guy that's 280 pounds. So it's like, I see 280 pounds, and this guy's maybe 3-4 and 4-3 end, but he's never going to be like an stand up outside linebacker. Like he might, dude. He can go. He can play coverage. He can play run defense. He can rush after the passer. You could put him inside and play 3 tech. Like he has good pad level. Like I don't know, dude. I don't know where you put this guy, but I think the answer is anywhere.
yeah, I would agree. I think that's the thing about him, and that's what makes him intriguing for the Giants. His Giant grade is good. Like, let's get at his grades real quick. I mean, explosiveness and quickness. I gave him a 4, you gave him a 3, and this is where we had our debate. And this is to me his first step, but I get what you're saying. But upper body strength and hands, 5. I mean, he's
Mhm.
powerful. Bend, I think average 3 is fair. Pressures 3. He could definitely get better there for the reasons we just talked about. Edge setting is a 4. You could have gone to 5 here, but I think he's closer to 5 than he is to 3 on this
I
floor.
think if he shedded blockers better, he'd be a 5.
Drop zone was a 4, remarkably athletic for his size. Now, I didn't add the other grades. Durability, I would say, is a 4. A Giants grade, I'd also put as a 4.
I agree.
And the Goon grade is a 4 too. He's a good Goon. Why Giants grade 4 when we have two, maybe 3 edge rushers? Because we don't have a defensive end like this guy. And I think that's what he is at the NFL level, right? I think right off the bat, his size he's going to play at about 6'4", 290. This is like a 4-3 defensive end, maybe a 3 tech, um, and a guy who can slide outside and be a stand-up edge. I mean, this is a very useful guy who is more of a D lineman than he is, an outside linebacker.
He he
And so,
he could be fun, man.
yeah, he'd be really useful. And I think he's the kind of guy like you slide him next to Dexter Lawrence, and you really can open up what you do with a guy like Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns.
I
Because he could really set that edge very nicely.
I'm just trying to like imagine the different ways you could use him in like a 3-4 defense. And it's like on like early downs, you could have him lined up as just like an outside linebacker and he could bring enough pass rush mixed with like being a really strong edge setter that you can help stop the run in early downs. Then like pass rush downs, if you have like 3 down linemen, he can play the 5 tech. If you have 2 down linemen, the 2 edges, he can play the 3 tech. Like I think you could really move him all around. You can kind of do everything for you, and kind of depending on the down, you could have him all over the place. So that's kind of exciting part about him.
Yeah. I think at the NFL level, his calling card is gonna be just an elite run defender who can generate pass rush with some consistency. That's what I think his calling card is, and those guys are underrated. I think his pass rush upside is nice, and it's something that I think I'd pay attention to, but if you can play like him, you're such a high floor player in the NFL and a coveted one that I think that's his calling card, and, I was thinking about comps for him, and I can see, like, a Joey Bosa,
Mm.
type comp for this guy, like a big, strong guy who can be a stand-up edge, but also is really good just grinding towards the inside of the line. So, I
I
think
have
he's a
a
really good player. I think he's a lot of fun. I would enjoy having him on the Giants.
I have a Giants comp for you. Not necessarily like play style, but
Mhm.
from a versatility standpoint. How about like a Matthias Kunuka, a guy
Yeah,
who played linebacker, D end, would move inside on NASCAR packages, a guy who kind of did everything.
yeah, I like it. And then the question is, where do you take a guy like this, right? Is that a first round type player?
Hmm.
And I mean, I think you're going to have to swing on the upside with Scorton if you want to believe in him as a first round player. I think he'll go in the first round, but I do agree with the Kiwanuka usage at a much higher level. I think he has much
Hmm.
more upside than Kiwanuka did coming out of college. Although Kiwanuka was an outstanding prospect, um, I can see it though. I can see him in a really good defensive line being a weapon where you just slide all over the line and use as an edge, use as a lineman, just really useful. So exciting player. I wouldn't be surprised if, like, for example, for whatever reason, weird things happen. If this guy slid in the draft a little bit, he might be a good fit for the Giants. I don't know if he's a first round fit for the Giants, but I think he's a fascinating player that they should be keeping their eye on.
I
All
agree.
right. You want to go number three?
Yes.
All
So
right.
number three, this was a guy that we were both very big fans of and was somebody you started getting the jump on a little bit early and you like told me, all right, like you got to watch this game. So I did and jumped off film. That's just Josiah Stewart out of Michigan, 6'1", 245 pounds. He was a 4-star recruit, and Josiah Stewart, so far this year, is having an incredible season, really being a full-time player for Michigan. Uh, 92 PFF grade, 84.1 run defense grade, 92.7 pass rush grade, and a 69.6 coverage grade. So far in this season, he has 29 pressures, which matches his total from all of last year. But the rate he is doing this at is insanity. He has a 25.1% win rate right now. But if you also put that on true pass sets, he's winning at a 41.8 true pass rush win percentage. So I'll say I originally kind of went into this expecting Josiah Stewart to be one of those situational pass rushers. That was kind of my assumption. That was kind of who I thought he was. But to me, I saw a very, very good, like, full package edge rusher. And I saw a guy who, and I say that not just in the sense of a guy who I felt can affect in the run defense and coverage, but I mean as like a pass rusher. This is a highly explosive athlete. He has a quick first step, but he has so many ways to get into the backfield. He he has the speed to power that can really overwhelm tackles and put him into the backfield. He really comes off the ball with so much speed and has this kind of like wide alignment a lot of times, and just takes the offensive line momentum and really launches them back. He matches that with that good first step and his bend, kind of like we were talking about with James Pierce. Not quite to James Pierce's level. I'll say I don't think, like I said, I don't think he has an elite first step. I think he has a very quick first step. I think the way I would kind of describe him personally is he is like a guy who gets faster as the play goes along. Like once he gets his first couple steps, he gets faster and faster and faster with each step. He has this insane closing speed that he gets to the quarterback and almost feels like the quarterback doesn't expect him to get there that fast based off of how things were moving initially. And the other thing I wanted to say about his pass rush that I think is really, really awesome about him is he does this thing where I sent you a video of this, Sal, and I ended up seeing it like 4 more times. He like sets the offensive tackle up that he's like taking an outside move, and then he just teleports to the inside gap on this guy and blows by him. And I saw it one time. I was like, that was awesome. Like this guy looks like a point guard. He looks like a Russell Westbrook, like going one-on-one, driving to the hoop. And he does this over and over and over again. And it was so incredible. I assume, yeah, Rad is upset in here because I did watch that USC game, and oh boy, did he terrorize USC. It felt like his presence was felt on every single play.
It was rough to watch.
Yeah, it
It was
was
tough.
every play he was affecting it. And I felt like he had like I said, for a guy who I thought was more of a situational passer, I felt he had really good like strength and anchor in like the run game. Obviously I do think his size and like his length is going to be a concern for to be a full down player. I don't think he's again, he's not an advantage in the run game. I do think he's a little better than James Pierce was. But I don't think he's like that's his strength either. But so it'll be interesting if teams feel like he can be a full-time player due to his size, or how they're gonna like line him up and where they're gonna put him. Like he's probably play like a linebacker role. I don't think you can really put him on like a line as like a 4-3 D end or something like that. It's gonna be interesting when he has to line up a little bit closer in the line of scrimmage. I saw him like a wide 9 a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So, we'll see when he's a little more traditional NFL defense. Let's say he like when I say he did that, like kind of one some of the ways James Pierce did where he get around and bend. I would say he used more of his athleticism and a good rip move, but like he can be a little bit stiff at times. And I noticed that a little bit in coverage too. Like he, as fast as he has a straight line speed, he can get kind of like off balance and be a little wonky when he's trying to like move horizontally. So, there's some give and take there, but he was really, really impressive to me. What else do you have to add on Josiah Stewart? I know you are also a big fan of his.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed most of it, but like I texted you the other day when we were going through these. I'm like, go watch Josiah Stewart. Like whatever you're doing, just put it down and watch Josiah Stewart right now. And
Yeah.
then within like 20 minutes, you were like, holy shit, And
Yeah.
I've been watching, Shane talk about this kind of timeline like for weeks now. Like if Josiah Stewart isn't in the edge conversation, you're doing it wrong. And I'm watching it. I'm like, I saw clips of him. Like, yeah, he looks really good, but until I really like dug into watching these games, I really didn't even begin to appreciate how good this guy was. Um, and admittedly, I watched more Michigan games last year than I watched this year, just because there were so many more players that we were kind of doing a week by week evaluation of. They still have a ton of players to come out, but I wasn't
Arguably the
expecting
top 2 in the
Stewart.
country.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting Stewart to be here, but you know, he just jumps out at you on the screen. Like you don't have to be watching. That's the thing. You don't have to be watching for Josiah Stewart. Just watch the game, the regular broadcast, and he's flying all over the field. And the guy is just, I mean, the motor on him is insane. I mean, I kept thinking to myself, I put the comp down as I viewed him as like kind of similar to Chop Robinson.
Yeah, I like that.
Um, yeah, like undersized, but plays with a like just a nasty, crazy motor. Dude, there were reps where he's so quick, where he does like you said, the point guard like inside outside step, where
Mhm.
he'll just fake like the inside step, and then he goes to the outside, and he's in the backfield, and it's almost like the tackle didn't even get out of the goddamn stance yet. Like
Yeah.
he doesn't know where the guy went, and that setup, that speed, that short area quickness, the explosiveness, you can't teach that stuff. And it's not just speed. You have to watch him over and over again. He's smaller at 6'1", 6'1", 245. You know, the average, guy at this position is like 6'4", 6 to 6'6", 250, 260 in that range, So he's a little undersized in height, but he doesn't just win with speed. He takes that speed and he just destroys tackles. Like he goes right
Yep.
into them, gets his hands into their chest, and
Mhm.
drives them backwards. So it's not like just a speed guy. It's speed, it's power. He has spin moves. He has like counter moves, and he's so quick to the inside. Like you said, I think more of his bend than you did by a little bit. I
Mhm.
think I saw enough flashes where I'm like, I can see this being above average at the NFL level, but I understand the concern, and obviously the size is an issue. But for the most part, like if the guy wasn't 6'1", we're talking about this guy probably as like a top 10 pick. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's how good he was on tape. And so he's edge three. I think the most important number you mentioned was that 25.1% pass rush win rate. That is number one in college football right now. Number one. He wins more pass rush sets than anybody in college. So you got to be paying attention to Josiah Stewart. I've been looking to see where he shows up on people's lists, and he's not on the big lists. And I think it has to do with his height, but I think he's going to be a very popular player as we approach the
And
draft.
And I'm glad you kind of added the going through the list, which ones we talked about, because I wanted to look at Josiah Stewart too, because I've kept my eye on him, because I've been looking at the PFF like pressure numbers and stuff like that, and I check him out every week or every couple weeks, and he's been consistently sticking at the top of them. He started out very hot the beginning of the year, and he's been sticking there. And like I said, I'm like I don't hear about this guy, so like, is this just another one of those situational pass rushers? But like, no, like this dude feels like outside of his size, such a full package player.
Yeah, he's really outstanding. And I think because of his size, though, and this is what Shane's getting at, that Josiah Stewart is such a giant, and of course he wants that. I would want it too. But because of that height, I don't think he's going to go in the first round. You know, he
Hmm.
deserves to, but I have a feeling this guy's going to slide a little bit. And I think it's always, like, I mean, 6'1" is what, like 15th, 10th percentile for edge rushers? It's down there,
Yeah.
so it's going to be an issue. People are going to tell him you can be an off ball linebacker, and stuff like that. So there's going to be that discussion, but he really is an edge rusher. So, um, I gave him a Chop Robinson comp. Like I said before, I think I view him as like a first, second round projection. Although I would have no problems with taking this guy in the first round, honestly. Not maybe in the top 10 where the Giants are right now, but if we were drafting in the 20s, I would
Hmm.
happily take this guy and add him
He's
to
such
my D line.
yeah, he's such like I see like a Ravens or like a Pittsburgh take this guy like the end
Such a
of the
s- such a
yeah.
stealer.
Yeah.
Like, it really is. Like they just collect these guys, and they just roll them out and dominate teams. But let's go through the grading real quick. We both gave him an overall 3.67 grade, so that's basically nearing an above average to like borderline Pro Bowl type player in the
Hmm.
NFL. Explosiveness, quickness. You gave him a 4. I gave him a 5. Um, Arbitrary distinctions. We have a slightly different approach on this.
Yeah.
Upper body strength. We both gave him 4. We see that with his hands, the way he just gets his hands inside the chest of linemen and drives them back. Ben, this is where we talked about things that you're a little bit less high on him than I am. You gave him a 3, I gave him a 4. But you were higher on him in the pressures. You gave him a 5, and I gave him a 4. And to be fair, the data backs you up on this.
And
The edge
and
setting, yeah, go ahead.
I'll say like even though it's 1 year, like I mean it's not 1 year. He's had other years of doing this, but of really being a special guy. It's just when you watch the tape, man, out of all these guys that we go over, you feel his presence on every single play. I don't feel the presence watching a guy more than I do this guy.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think he's really just he's a guy who just fucks up football games. You watch him, he just wrecks it. Um, Edge setting, you gave it 3. I gave him a 2. I didn't love the way he set the edge here. I think he struggles a little bit in the run game. I think he can be decent, but there were just too many times where the play got past him because he was just so aggressive getting into the backfield. So I gave him a 2. But
That's
yeah,
fair. I just felt like especially for what I was looking for from a guy his size, I felt like he anchored down really well on the edge and could hold a spot and force things inside. But he does get a little aggressive. I hear that.
and in drop zone, we both gave him a 3. I think he's athletic enough,
Mhm.
to be a serviceable drop zone defender. Well, and by the way, we should probably clarify this. So again, just like the other positions, we use the Bill Walsh guide to go through the traits and the things we're looking for on tape for each position group. And he does mention the drop zone thing, and I think that's important. So we're not expecting edge rushers to like run with guys, but and we've talked about this with guys like Kayvon and Wink System. You want a good athletic edge who you can actually show pressure and he can drop and take away like that short area zone and be athletic enough. So what we're looking for is, does the guy have the athleticism to cover that area back, show pressure, back up, get his hands in the passing window, and then if there's somebody in that range, close on the ball and make a play, make a tackle, or or a pass breakup. So that's kind of what we're talking about with that. And all we're looking for is the guy able to slide into that zone nicely, quickly, and not be a liability. So I thought he was average there. So overall, 3.67, edge 3 for us. I know this is going to seem like sacrilege to our friend DKit, but we've mentioned our top 3 guys, and his favorite player has not been mentioned, who's the consensus number 1. And I think it's time to get to that right now,
Mhm.
right?
He's very good.
He's really good. This is not a knock on him at
Yeah.
all.
This isn't Deion Walker. We just fell this way.
Right. We're not grading this based on how we think it's going to land in the draft. We're just talking about guys we like and how we grade them. And we're going to stick to it and just kind of see how it plays out. Just try to be objective. A lot of the stuff we're doing, we learned in our discussion from Matt Waldman, just independently review things, do your own scoring system, just let the chips fall where they do and then learn from it, and go on to the next year. So we're going to stick with that process. But I am looking for number 4 here, and
He's at the very top.
yeah, let me scroll up here. I know we're a little out of order on this one.
Yeah,
All right.
he's in the freak list.
Yes, that's why. Yeah, he was in the freak list, and that's why he's higher up. Oh, there he is. Okay. All right. Our number 4 edge rusher. Um, Number 1 on most lists, and probably it will be the top edge rusher taken, or if not the second, in this class when all is said and done. But our number 4 on this list is Abdul Carter from Penn State, 6'3", 259 pounds. He was a 4-star recruit. He's a junior. This year so far, he has, let me pull up his stats. Um, oh, goodness, I just had it a second ago. Give me 1 second. I don't know why I lost it. All right. So this year so far, Abdul Carter has 8 sacks. He has 36 pressures. He has played a total of 446 snaps, 225 in pass defense, pass rush snaps, 187 in run defense. He has a 91.1 pass rush grade. He has a 76.1 run defense grade. He has a 91.4 true pass rush grade and a 20.4% pass rush win rate. So again, in the elite category, I think he was number 2 or number 3 in the country in that category. So those are his stats. I mean, what you need to know about Abdul Carter is this is the specimen that everybody wants at edge rusher. He was a Feldman freak. We discussed him in the freak list episode.
Mhm.
Um, he's been clocked, with a 22.4 mile per hour max velocity at his size on GPS, which is, just think about that for a second. And that's like elite running back speed, and the guy's doing it at his size at 6'3", 259. He ran a 4.48 40-yard dash, 97 percentile for edge rushers, and a 4.35 20-yard shuttle, 66 percentile for edge rushers. He supposedly has a 33.5-inch vertical and a 10.7 broad jump, 350 power clean, 375 power bench press, and a 600-pound squat. Former basketball player, elite athlete. He is explosive, Monty. That's what pops out on this film in every way. Every movement is explosive. He's a speed to power guy. He has a strong push and punch with his hands. He gets his hands, much like the last guy, into people's chest, drives them backwards. and he is lightning quick with his footwork. I mean, I think that's what stands out. His feet are quick, and despite being an explosive athlete, despite being so strong and being able to engage contact, his feet are so quick. He will just slide off tackles and has a repertoire of moves that are difficult to defend. He has a dip and rip. He has a push pull. He has a swim move. He does show it all, despite him being relatively new to the edge position, because this guy Monty was it. Much like the other number 11 that preceded him at Penn State, played off-ball linebacker and was moved over to edge rusher. So he has that famous number 11 that Michael Parsons wore, same pathway, off-ball linebacker to edge kind of transition, although Parsons never really got to it in college because of COVID, but that was the plan before COVID hit and he took off a year. Um, this is a smooth athlete. He's good in coverage. He's versatile. He can play the middle linebacker position because he played off-ball linebacker. So you'll see him in different alignments and different snaps. A lot of times he's on the edge, and all of a sudden he's playing middle linebacker, and
Mhm.
and he's
Oh,
able to
yeah.
take away run gap he's a better run defender when he's playing middle linebacker, which is fascinating. I mean, I think he sets a decent edge, um, but as a middle linebacker, he can cover two gaps. He's a very intelligent run defender. So he's
Mhm.
got the acumen of just an all around old school linebacker. Um, Cons I listed, he can get washed at times. He's very aggressive in pass rush. I think some of that is being immature, and he'll be over aggressive on the outside rush, and he'll just get washed. I've seen that
Mhm.
multiple plays where he tries to get to the outside, and good athletic tackles will just wash him out of the play. He's gone. He has no chance to be involved in. While he's pretty good as, like I said, in the run game as a middle linebacker, he has inconsistencies in setting the edge. But overall, I think this is a phenomenal athlete and the kind of player the NFL will covet. My draft projection for him is top 10 to 12 picks, probably top 10. And my player comp for him, a lazy comp, but I put him, I gave him a Micah Parsons comp coming out of
Mhm.
college. So I covered a lot, but give me your thoughts on Abdul Carter.
Yeah, I mean, he is absolute freak athlete. I mean, you went over everything that makes him such a freak. I mean, they don't make many people like Abdul Carter with his size and speed profile. Um, I'll say for a guy who's like 6'3", 250, he does look a little bit thin on the field, and I feel like he gets, he can get tossed around a little bit at times in the run game. I saw him get abused by a tight end here or there, which I didn't love to see. But I think where it comes, what you were kind of saying was like you don't see that much when he played the linebacker position. I think he's still kind of learning the edge position, and that's where it falls with him. I think you are taking Abdul Carter in hopes developing him, and he is like this is not like a way like he is really really a high producing player right now because he's elite in the right spots and kind of like we were talking about with James Pierce. I still think James Pierce has him by a little bit with that get off, but because this is what I would say. Abdul Carter and James Pierce have the same ability to get off at an elite step. Carter just isn't consistent with his elite first step right now. I think that's something he needs to work at from a consistency standpoint. Um, but when he does get off of this first step, he is very, very, very hard to block because he's even a better athlete than Pierce once he gets out of that stance. And he wreaks havoc. Having to block somebody this big and fast is just simply not fair for offensive linemen, especially in college. I think he just needs to keep improving as a football player and as an edge rusher. That was really my main takeaway. I felt like he relied a lot on his speed right now. Um, and this is a different type of guy where I would legitimately be willing, and he will go in the first round, but I'd be willing to develop a guy who's a first round pick because he is a special, different type of football player. I was hoping to have a little bit more strength to his game and a little bit more consistency, especially based off his numbers and how high he's ranked. But he can really, he plays at a different speed than everybody else on the football field, and doesn't seem fair at times. So, if you're drafting a guy to be potentially the next Micah Parsons, maybe people doubted him, the Lawrence Taylor, and we got him. He could be our next Lawrence Taylor. Who knows? He has that type of upside. It's crazy. His upside's nuts, but he still needs to develop. So that's why he fell a little bit further down in my list here.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Let's go to the scores then, the grading system that we gave him. So as you pull it up, explosiveness and quickness, we both gave him a 5. I think that's really obvious. You don't need to watch, game film to see how explosive he is as an athlete. Upper body strength and hands, I gave him a 4. You gave him a 3. So a little bit of a difference there.
Yeah.
Ben, we both gave him a 3. I definitely think that's something he's gonna have to develop, but he doesn't lack the flexibility and the
No.
athleticism to have a higher Ben. He's a 3 right now.
I totally agree. Like there's nothing that I saw physically that this is like a stiff player. He just doesn't use it.
He's not physically limited in any way. We both gave him a 4 for pressures. You gave him a 2 for edge setting. I gave him a 3. I'll be honest, I could have given him a 2. I thought his edge setting was actually not great. I chalk that up to basically just inexperience at the position. I think edge setting is something that you learn with reps. And because he's such a good run defender as a middle linebacker, I'm not really worried about it at the NFL level. I think he'll handle it just fine, but that's fair.
I think what really did it for me is kind of what I mentioned earlier. I saw him get really just totally manhandled by tight ends at times, just like couldn't shed off them. And it's like buddy, it's not going to get easier against NFL offensive tackles.
Yep. Pressures, we both gave him a 4, edge setting a 3, and drop zone, we both gave him a 4. Just a really elite athlete. He can smoothly drop into coverage. And while he doesn't do a ton there yet, I think he's going to be he's such a good athlete. Like, you can use him in so many ways. We both gave him a 4 for durability, 4 for a Giants grade, and a 4 for goon. I gave him a 4 for a goon factor. You gave him a 3. Giants grade, let's talk about that for a second. This guy is a top 10 pick. Now, this is, I would say I grade him out as probably as a top 10, even though we're grading him as our edge 4 in our personal system. Realistically, he's probably looking at that top 10 to 12 pick, right around where the Giants are going. Now, I think all of us would love to see the Giants get a chance to pick their quarterback, but what if either the current regime stays and decides to not go first round quarterback because of where they're drafting? Maybe they go a veteran route, maybe get somebody else. Or maybe there's a new regime in town and they take a look at the roster and they think, we want to make some changes here. We're not going to reach for a quarterback. We don't necessarily love who's sitting there at pick 7, right? If the Giants are drafting there, for example, we don't want to trade a bunch of assets right away to move up to get, the top consensus top 2 guys. And we don't necessarily want to take a swing on Jalen Milroe, like whatever. You can come up with whatever permutation. Then you're looking at BPA and probably a BPA of a defensive position because this is a very strong defensive class. Would you consider in either of those scenarios a world where it's reasonable for the Giants to take a player like Abdul Carter and figure out the rest?
Yeah, I think there's other players that will ultimately intrigue me, but I think as Giants fans, we've learned there's no such thing as too many good pass rushers. We've won multiple Super Bowls that way, pretty much all of them from that. So, and I think this would actually be a really good fit for Abdul Carter because he would come in, reminiscent of when we drafted JPP. He would come in and he wouldn't have to be a top. He really be relied on at all his first year. He'd come in, play some special teams, come in and be a situational pass rusher, and learn under 2 really good edge rushers. I know Kayvon isn't quite to the level we want him to be, but he's good. Brian Burns is very good, and it'd be 2 guys they could learn under. And if Kayvon gets to where we've always hoped that he could be, hey, there's no issue having too many good pass rushers. But if he doesn't get there, you could trade him. You could ultimately let him walk and bring in Carter. It all depends on how it all plays out. But yeah, I wouldn't mind a move like that. It's would play into Giants tradition doing something like that.
And he's such an outstanding player. Like I think,
Hmm.
this is a lesson that we need to start learning as a fan base, as an organization, really. Just if you have an elite player to take, just take him.
Hmm.
Like don't force it. Like if you have an abundance of players that are elite athletes at a premier position, that's not a bad thing, right? You can either rotate them or you can now trade from a position of strength. Um, so I would not necessarily turn my nose up at a guy like him. I would agree with you that at the end of the day, I think there's going to be so many good defensive players that are at this range of the draft where it's not going to be hard to slide away from a guy like Carter and take someone else. But the reason I bring up that question is because I think there are scenarios in which the Giants are not looking to take a quarterback in the top 10. And you guys are looking at what do you take then? And it becomes a premier elite defensive player. And Carter definitely fits that bill as a prospect.
Hmm. I agree.
All right. So Carter, R4, although like I said, for a lot of people he's one, maybe two, and I think more likely than not he's gonna go high, but in our grading system he graded out as a four, but more a testament to the guys that were ahead of him. All right. Number five. So why don't you introduce our fifth edge rusher and the final one we're gonna go over today?
Yeah, and this one was our biggest discrepancy. I was much lower on this guy than you were. But that's Michael Williams, defensive end out of Georgia, 6'5", 265 pounds. He was a 5-star recruit, so very, very good football player. Michael Williams, so far on this year, not great production. 14 pressures, 2 sacks. So 7 tackles, two assist tackles, so 9 total. Uh, really, really not great production. But you know, as I go into this, I'll preface a comp you made for this one. I think's fair is another guy who's a big, athletic defensive end who didn't have the best production in the world, and that was Trayvon Walker. And I think when you see Michael Williams, he's going to be high on a lot of these lists. I mean, Dane Brugler had him number 8 on his big board. He was also somebody who had Trayvon Walker in the top 10 before anybody really even was talking about Trayvon Walker. So the idea that the NFL will like this guy is probably likely, but let's talk about at least what I saw when I saw him. I did see a good player. I saw a guy who could play anywhere from the zero tack all the way to like a stand up edge. I did think he had very good athleticism and he had very good strength. I didn't think he was quite to the Trayvon Walker level, but he was like very high end in both those areas. We'll go over our numbers on those, but very high end. Um, he's strong. He was strong at the point of attack and definitely, could move the offensive lineman around with ease compared to some of these other guys. He's a pretty fluid player. I thought he was good in the run game, uh, but you know my issue with him was one, we talked about the lack of production. That's obviously you don't love to see that, but I think one of my main issues that's a little bit of a bugaboo, especially for a guy who's I think is going to play in the line. I don't see he's really a guy who's going to be a stand-up rusher in the NFL. Is he played with really high pad level, and when you see a guy who maybe like you talk about, oh maybe he could be like a 3 or a 5 tech for us. I don't really like that if you have bad pad level. I didn't think he doesn't really have a good pass rush. So he's kind of seemingly winning with pure size and speed, but I don't think you know, he has good size and speed for his size, but he's not an elite athlete like a guy we just talked about in Abdul Carter. Abdul Carter, is 30 pounds lighter, but he plays at a different speed than some of these guys. He hasn't played at a different speed. He's very athletic and he's very strong, but I don't think he's Nick Scouridon strong, and I don't think he's Abdul Carter fast. But for his size, he's very good. Um, you know, I I thought he was a guy who I agree with you that is going to be very well liked by the NFL. But just like Trayvon Walker, I'm going to be a lot lower than that on this guy. And we'll get into grades and stuff like that. But I want you to talk a little bit why you liked him, because we obviously saw very different on this guy.
So we actually, when I read my, I think when you read my scouting notes and we talked about it, we had very similar scouting notes
Hmm.
on him. But I think where I differ in my view, I tend to side. I can see where the NFL really will love this guy because what I saw was a guy who, just like Trevon Walker, was used almost exclusively as an interior defensive lineman and, really undersized as an interior defensive lineman when you think about it. Yet he's bullying interior linemen backwards consistently, like hands in their chest and just driving them back with ease, shedding them. And he has quick feet, like much faster than you would expect from any interior D lineman. So he has that ability to impact the play both in the run game and the pass game by just driving the ball backwards. So I think he showed that ability in the interior, but he has the athleticism to hang out on the edge and do this from the edge. Now, I would agree that his transition edge has not been smooth. Doesn't generate a lot of pressure right now, not producing, but his strength, just his raw strength and the way he can set the edge and dominate linemen at the point of attack is something that I think will be coveted. I
Hmm.
think he's more like JPP, actually,
Yeah.
in
Hmm.
his in at least in his body type, right? Like
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
This is that JPP prototype that I think defenses will be looking for and saying, this guy is a really good athlete. I can eventually slide him out to a 4-3 defensive end. I agree with you. I don't think he's a very good stand-up outside linebacker, even though
Hmm.
he plays with his pad level a little too high right now. I just don't see him being highly effective if you put him in just that role. But as a
Yeah.
4-3 defensive end eventually, and in a four down lineman system, if he's the interior lineman, shading over the guard, I can see this guy being very, very useful early on and developing that game. And he has the physical traits to become like that JPP prototype. Again, nobody's JPP. Nobody has that freakish athleticism that JPP had, but I think teams are always looking for this, right? They're looking for that kind of player. So I'm giving him a little bit of grace in my grading system. I didn't see anything different than what you saw. I saw
Hmm.
the deficiencies in production, but when you watch him just dominate guys at the point of attack with ease and have such a solid anchor and base and just raw strength and athleticism, you can't ignore that. That's a guy they're going to want to work with. So Trent Baalke, who took Travon Walker, loves guys like this, right? I don't think he'll be a GM much longer, but he loves guys like
Yeah.
this. Um, Chris Ballard in Indianapolis loves guys like this. He's
Hmm.
going to test well. I don't think he'll test again. I don't think he'll test as well as Travon Walker did, but he'll test very well. I'm pretty certain of that.
Hey,
Guys
he's
like this
five-star
who have this kind
recruit.
of strength. Yeah, I mean, exactly. So I think people are going to want him. And there is something to be said about these Georgia defensive linemen. Their production is always somewhat lagging their
Hmm.
ability. And it's just the way Kirby Smart uses them, right? He rotates
Yeah.
them, he has them playing all over the place. So I can't go by just production numbers for a Georgia lineman knowing exactly how they're used. So I'm just looking at the raw traits here. So I agree with everything you said in terms of criticism, but I would just say there's so much to work with here that NFL teams will covet this. And is he going to go top 10? I don't know. Possibly. Travon Walker went one overall, and people laugh when I remember Dan Jeremiah saying, I think he had a mock to the Giants at 7, and people were laughing. You're crazy. And then he went 1. So
Hmm.
teams like it. They like prototypes like this. But let's go through the grading system because I think this is where we have our differences, and I think I try to explain why we viewed it differently.
Yeah. I think it'll
But
be a good opportunity to kind of talk through it a little bit as we go through it.
all right, explosiveness and quickness, we both gave him a 4. He has that explosive first
Yeah.
step and that power. Upper body strength 4. I could have given him a 5 here. He's so strong, but 4 I
Hmm.
think is above average. Bend, you gave him a 2, which I think is fair. I gave him a 3. Again, a guy who doesn't has limited reps as an edge rusher. I thought showed me enough where I can see this getting there, and he has the athleticism. But we have a
Yeah, I just
difference
felt
there.
he was a little stiff, and then he just didn't really do it. Like, we talked about with Carter, or like Carter didn't really do it, but I don't. I have less doubts that Carter can do it. I have a little bit more doubts that Williams can do it.
That's fair. Pressure, you gave him a 2. Again, not productive. I gave him a 3 because of what I said. I think the production caveat in Georgia, you have to take
Yeah.
that into account with how they're utilized. And I saw enough on tape where I think this guy's at least an average, get pressure kind of edge setter. Edge setting 4 for both of us. In drop zone, you gave him a 2. I gave him a 3. We have a difference in opinion here. Tell me why you gave him a 2.
He just doesn't do it. He never does it. He has 3 dropbacks all of this year. So like I thought he was, and I thought he could be a little bit stiff at times, like moving like horizontally and stuff like that. So
No, I get you. I gave him a 3. Again, I'm projecting.
mhm.
Admittedly, I'm projecting this based on traits to some extent. I gave him a 4 in durability. I'm guessing you give him a 4 too. Giants grade, I gave him a 5. And you're giving him a 4. We'll get to that. And
Mhm.
a goon grade of 4 for both of us. So again, the reason I gave him a 5 on the Giants grade is because he's that prototype I think that they could use. That power guy on the interior, interior D end, let's put it that way, and that sounds crazy, but like a 3-4 D end or even a 4-3 D end as a down lineman, the Giants need a guy like this who can set the edge and drive the pocket backward. You need somebody who can push and collapse that pocket from the ends, uh, from the tackles. You need somebody who can supplement or complement rather what's being done with Dexter Lawrence on the inside, and somebody who's going to take some pressure off Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns to get to the
Mhm.
quarterback. So I would have no qualms about taking this guy and using him, the way Georgia does. So that's why I gave a 5. What do you think?
It's hard for me to give him a good Giants fit when I have no interest in having him on my football team, at his current price. So 4, I agree with everything you said. 4, but 4 was generous on its own for me because I wanted to go lower because I don't want him.
That's fair. You don't want him. You don't want him. You didn't want Trevon Walker either. I didn't want Trevon Walker.
I wa
Um,
I remember I was on, shout out New York Revival. I remember I had the first pick in their people mock draft, and I fucked up everyone else's pick by getting it wrong. But it was, you were starting to hear Javon Walker rumors, but it wasn't, like, official yet, and I made this big speech about, like, Aiden Hutchinson, about how, like, Aiden Hutchinson's also a freak athlete, but he's actually good, and it was a whole thing, and fuck Trent Baalke, right?
I mean, don't look now, but he's beginning to turn his career around. I mean, he's
Yeah.
not producing at the level of a number 1 pick,
It ain't
certainly,
no
but
Aiden Hutchinson.
no, he's not Aiden Hutchinson, but unfortunately, neither is Kayvon Thibodeau.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
but we didn't have an
um,
opportunity to Aiden Hutchinson, unlike them.
yeah, Jacksonville could have taken him. All right, so that's our 5. So again, let's review it. We both we landed. There was some discrepancy, but we landed on James Pierce, the number 1 edge rusher out of Tennessee.
Mhm,
Our number 2 edge rusher was Nick Scorton out of Texas A&M. Number 3 edge rusher was Josiah Stewart out of the University of Michigan. Number 4 edge rusher was Abdul Carter out of Penn State. And number 5, Mikael Williams out of Georgia. And we went through the grading system. We appreciate everybody who stuck through it. I know these episodes get tedious, but we want to give you guys an objective evaluation, as objective as we can make this. And we're going to have different grading systems. We'll probably publish a list out at some point with how we ranked everybody, and people will
mhm,
laugh and say, "How did you do that? Look at the consensus boards." But like again, Matt Wallman, I think we learned so much in our meeting with him, with our long pod with Matt, and I think the big take home I learned was like forget all this other stuff, like just you know drown out the noise, watch them yourselves with an objective criteria in mind, and just score them.
and if it doesn't work, we'll look at the scoring system and try to find new ways to grade them. Like,
Exactly, and you learn from
we'll
it.
learn.
All right. So that's our edge rushing episode. Let's go through next week's games as we approach. We're actually
What
in week
week are we
13 of
on?
college football. 13.
Wow.
We got to get to work on these pods. We got to get these things done. We're gonna have to start doubling up if we can. But week 13. So let's see. Tomorrow night, NC State at Georgia Tech. That's kind of an interesting game at 7:30. Friday night, Temple at UTSA, Purdue, Michigan State, UNLV, San Jose State. Nothing fun there. I think this is the big matchup on Saturday afternoon. The big 12 o'clock game is number 6 Indiana at number 2 Ohio State.
Mhm.
Indiana is undefeated, and their new head coach just got an 8-year extension worth, I think, up to 8 to 10 million per year. Uh,
Well, only a matter of time
Signati,
somebody has to buy that out.
right? So really fantastic, job he's doing with Indiana. He used to be at James Madison.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, Indiana's playing great. They struggled a little bit against Michigan, but they won the game. Ohio State has had their ups and downs. They were our kind of consensus team to win it all going into the season with the talent they had and all the returning seniors. But this is it. I mean, this is the battle for supremacy here in the Big Ten outside of Oregon. So this year, these two teams are the ones to watch. That's the big game to see if to see who comes out on top. I'm kind of scrolling through the rest of the games. I'm looking for something good for you guys.
One thing I'll
Um,
mention before we move off the Indiana game, we'll probably, I'm guessing we'll do a two-part quarterback episode like we did last time and try to get some of these second guys. Somebody, we're gonna have to look at for that. A second group there is Curtis Rourke, Nathan Rourke's brother, Indiana's quarterback. He's been graded really high on like the PFF grades and stuff like that this year, and obviously a big part in Indiana's success.
Definitely worth watching. At that 12 o'clock hour, you may want to scroll back and forth to Wake Forest at number 8 Miami, if for no other reason than to see one of the potential top two quarterbacks in the upcoming draft, Cam Ward, who's having a Heisman campaign out in Miami. Miami coming off a rough loss, but still in the hunt, likely to make the college football playoffs. And then there's an Ole Miss Florida game, although Florida has been a disaster this year. So,
Hmm.
relative to their usual self. But again, Jackson Dart's in that game. Worth paying attention to. I think he's probably a good day two quarterback. I don't think he's going to be a day one guy, but we'll see.
Yeah, I don't see it right now, but we'll take a look at them closer. I'll say two games at 3:30. You got BYU versus Arizona State. That should be a really good game. You got 14 versus 21 in the country, and then another. You mentioned of the two top quarterbacks. You'd say the other one, Shador Sanders, going up against Kansas. Colorado's only favorites by 3 points, so that's a game to watch with another top quarterback in this class.
Yeah. And Colorado is slowly working their way to being eligible to win the Big 12,
Hmm.
And if they do, they have a chance to have a top four, bye essentially in the playoff system.
Hmm.
We'll see how that goes. I think Mountain West is the other conference right now. Boise State, I think, has the inside track on that fourth seed, but we'll see how it all plays out in the end. Um, UCF at West Virginia, that should be a good game. I know you'll be watching that at
Yeah.
3:30. Your Mountaineers have had an up and down season. Some good wins, but some heartbreakers.
And Neil Brown needs to get fired.
Army at Notre Dame.
That's a
This
cool
these
one
are
at Yankee
two
Stadium.
at Yankee Stadium. It's a two ranked teams. Notre Dame is a 15-point favorite. I'll be honest. I'll be surprised if they won by less than 25 points in this game. They're really rolling. If you haven't been paying attention to what the Irish are doing lately, they're really steamrolling teams right now.
No, dude, Bryson Daly, um, Army's QB. He's been really fucking good this year. I have him as my he's on my college football fantasy team. He has over 1,000 yards rushing and 21 rushing touchdowns this year.
No, I mean it's going to be a good one to watch.
Yeah.
And then in the evening, USC at UCLA is always a fun game, although neither team is ranked this year. Vanderbilt at LSU might be fun to watch. Not a lot of big powerhouse matchups there. Alabama at Oklahoma at 7:30 is always fun to watch, although Oklahoma's been struggling of late. These are all the games that you could tune into after hours. I think of the games that are available, USC and UCLA is probably the one to tune into. We have a question in the chat from Eric Tige. I hope I'm saying your name right. Off topic, who's your QB1 this draft right now? For me, it is definitely Shador Sanders. What about you, Monty?
I think I'm still Shador. I worry a little bit about his personality, and ultimately for the Giants, I might end up leaning Cam Ward. But Shador, as far as tape, what I've seen from last year, I would say Shador.
Yep. And we'll
Um,
see how it goes. And we haven't done our breakdown yet, to be fair,
yeah.
though, Eric. So we'll do our full breakdown and try to bring it to you guys when we do our QB episode.
One thing I want to throw in here, I meant to mention it earlier because I forgot to do it during it. James Pierce also made the freak list. So, and we didn't talk anything about some of his numbers for. So before we get out of here, I just wanted to say kind of what they had to say on him. Pierce clocked 23 miles per hour on a pick six versus Iowa last
Mm.
year. That's insane. I mean, 23. That's like you could argue that's like you could translate that to 4.3 speed. What they're saying here, he's a legitimate 4.4 threat, but 23 miles per hour is crazy. So most of this just here is just talking about his success as a pass rusher, but 23 miles per hour on a pick six and legitimate 4.4 40 threat. So yeah, he's a freak athlete.
Yeah, that guy, he's going to be a good NFL player. All right, that concludes our Edge episode. The Giants coming off their bye week again with a new starting quarterback for the first time in years without injury being a factor.
Mm-hmm.
Tommy DeVito going up against Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Bucks on Sunday. So tune in. We'll be with you guys next week. We're going to have to go over another position. I think we still have to get through a few. We've already done tight ends and running backs and offensive tackles. We need to get to the interior O-line and we've done running back also. And so we need to do the interior line and we need to do, wide receiver and quarterback, obviously. And on the defensive side, we have now handled edge rushers, defensive linemen, off-ball linebackers. We've done cornerbacks. We really just have to do safety at this point, I think. Right? Am I missing anything here?
Yeah, I think I think it's just safety for defense. We have a few on offense.
Right. So we'll have to get through offensive line and then we'll probably do offensive line, wide receiver, two back-to-back offensive episodes, and then we'll probably get back to finish on safety and then go right into quarterbacks after that.
Yeah, we'll talk. We'll try to figure out when we want to do quarterback. We'll plan around that.
Yep. But with that, we're going to close out. We appreciate you guys who've been here the whole time. Thank you for all of your support. Follow us. Follow me at Queens_guy. Follow Monty at MONTECRI5TO. Follow us at He's a Giant Pod. Like, subscribe. We appreciate you guys. I have a question from Ask7. I have to read it because Ask is a good dude who's always supporting us. Say the Giants forego QB in 2025. Will Johnson and Mason Graham are available. Who would you select for the Giants?
Let's assume Jalen Milroe goes round one.
I would probably take Mason Graham. Who would you
Oh,
take?
sorry, I misread it. Yeah, out of the two.
Yeah. Tough. Positional value would say take Will Johnson here.
Maybe the interior defensive line is getting paid more than corners.
And I just
Top
think
ones.
I think a player like Graham is such a perfect fit next to Dex that he could really finish off our defensive line in an elite way. So I would probably err on just finishing off our D line.
Yeah, make us make a strength even more of a strength. I hear that.
The identity of the team. We talk about this. What's his team identity, right? If you want
I
him to be
think
the D
cornerbacks.
line.
I think cornerback's been such a crapshoot in the NFL draft. I think I would just take Mason Graham and finish off this D line and figure out cornerback somewhere else.
Perfect. All right. With that, we appreciate you guys. We'll see you next week. We'll keep you updated on the dates. Till then, go Giants.
Go Giants.